So today's directions, 8th grade, are pretty basic and they're going to sound familiar. Solve the equation. That's pretty much what we're doing. You're going to get something, for example, that looks like this. Let's say we're going to have 6w squared minus 3w equals 0. So to solve the equation, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to factor this equation, similar to what we did yesterday. So I'm going to see, well, I'm going to look at 6w squared minus 3w, and I'm going to realize that the common factor is 3w, because 3 works with the 3 and 6, w works with the w and the w squared. So my common factor is 3w. So I'm going to set this up now. That's going to be on the outside. 6w squared divided by 3w. It's going to be 2w. 6 divided by 3 is 2. W squared divided by w is w. Negative 3w divided by 3w equals 1. So 3w multiplied by 2w minus 1 equals 0. Then this goes back to our zero property, kind of what we talked about back in the days with Mrs. Wineland or Mrs. Reichert. One of the first things they would have taught you about your multiplication tables was that anything times 0 is going to equal 0. So for this multiplication problem, whatever the value of 3w is, multiplied by whatever the value of 2w minus 1 is, one of these values have to be 0. So if 3w equals 0, then w would have to be 0, because 3 times 0 is 0. But you could also have 2w minus 1 equaling 0. 2w minus 1 equals 0, which means that if 2w minus 1 equals 0, then 2w equals 1, because I'm adding 1 to both sides. And if 2w equals 1, then w must equal 1 divided by 2, or 1/2. Which means that in this equation, the final answer would be w equals 0, w equals 1/2. And that's how we would do that. Now, let's say that I get something that looks like this. That's pretty basic. But let's say that I get something that looks like this, and it's done a little bit differently. Let's say that I have, I don't know, we're going to go 9h to the power of 2 equals 3h. Now here nothing's equaling 0, so since I don't have anything that equals 0, I need to rewrite this equation as something that equals 0. So all I'm going to do is subtract 3h from both sides, and that's going to give me 9h squared minus 3h equals 0. So I'm subtracting 3h from this side, that's giving me 0, and I'm subtracting 3h from this side, that's giving me 9h squared minus 3h. So now that I've done that, now I'm ready to factor. And I'm thinking, okay, what's the greatest common factor? Well, it's going to be 3h. Because I can take 3h into 3h, I can take 3h into h squared. So 3h is what's going to go on the outside. 9 divided by 3 is 3. H squared divided by h is h. And then a negative 3h divided by 3h is going to be negative 1. And then that whole thing equals 0. Once again, now we have a multiplication problem with a number in parentheses. One of these numbers has to be equal to 0. Either this has to be equal to 0 or this has to be equal to 0. So if 3h equals 0, then common logic would tell us that h equals 0. But it could also be that 3h minus 1 is equal to 0. And if 3h minus 1 is equal to 0, then 3h is going to equal 1, because I'm going to add 1 to both sides. And if 3h equals 1, then h is going to equal 1 over 3, which means my final answer is h is 0, and h can be 1 over 3. The idea being that there's going to be two answers in all of your problems today. You saw that we had two answers in the first one, w equals 0 and 1/2. We have two answers in this one, h equals 0, h equals 1/3. You're always going to have two answers. So let's look at one more, and then we'll move on. Okay? So let's say that I have 28x to the power of 2, and that's going to equal negative 8x. All right? So once again, I have an equation just like my previous example, but it doesn't equal 0. So I need to rewrite this as an equation that equals 0. So since I have a negative 8x, I'm going to add 8x to both sides. I'm going to bring this 8x over here. And I'm going to end up with 28x to the power of 2 plus 8x equals 0. I add 8x to this side, that gives me 0. I add 8x to this side, I get 28x squared plus 8x equals 0. Well, now I need to factor it with the greatest common factor. Well, I'm thinking of 8 and 28. I'm thinking that the greatest common factor is 4. 4 is the biggest number that can go into both 8 and 28 evenly. Remember, I'm not worried about 8 and, well, that 8 can go into 28 3.5 times or anything like that. We just use whole numbers. So the best whole number with 28 and 8 is 4. And then obviously the x is going to be part of it. Okay, the x is going to be part of it. So the greatest common factor is 4x. Now when I take 28x squared and divide it by 4x, 28 divided by 4 is 7. X squared divided by x is just going to be x. Remember, same base number, subtract the exponents, 2 minus 1, just going to get 7x. Now 8x divided by 4x is going to give me a plus 2. Okay, 8x divided by 4x, that's going to go twice, because 8 divided by 4 is 2, x divided by x is 1, 2 times 1 makes 2. The whole thing is equal to 0. So once again, for this multiplication problem, the value of 4x being multiplied by the value that is in parentheses, which is 7x plus 2, one of these values has to be equal to 0. So, well, 4x could equal 0. And if 4x equals 0, then x would have to be 0, because 4 times 0 is 0. But we could also have 7x plus 2, and that value would equal 0. Well, if 7x plus 2 equals 0, to solve for x, I'm going to have to subtract 2 from both sides, which tells me that 7x equals negative 2. And if 7x equals negative 2, that tells me that x equals negative 2 over 7. Okay, negative 2 divided by 7, negative 2 over 7. Which means my solutions for x are x equals 0 and negative 2 over 7. And that's how you solve. I will be available to help on this assignment during the Zoom session next Thursday, April 16, 1 o'clock. So if you have any questions about this assignment, you'll notice on your worksheet, you'll just need to rewrite them out, show your factoring on another sheet of paper, something, or if you want to print this out, it's up to you how you want to do that. But I'll be available to help on Thursday, April 16. All right, talk to you later, 8th grade. Bye.